Okay, I want to thank you all for coming today to hear about a very tense topic, especially in the wake of the last week's election results. I'm Dr. Paul Cato. I'm a professor in the Black Studies Department, and while I've only been here for, as I just told a friend, 2.5 months, the first thing I noticed when I came to Providence College was the absence of blackness. And this was a strange phenomenon to me as somebody who has been at elite white schools since he was born, having been raised by a mother who taught at one of those elite DC prep schools that they based Mean Girls off of, and having gone to Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania, then University of Chicago, having taught at Carleton College last year, the list goes on. And I see, even now in this room, despite being asked to have given this talk by black students, there are more black people on that poster outside of the door, the mural outside of that door in Moore Hall than there are in this classroom, in this audience room. I see black faces over there, especially in that corner, with their faculty and staff. And this brings a central question that I need everyone in this classroom to go through as I bear witness to what I have seen and what I have heard today. Where are the black people, and why would they not feel comfortable and safe enough to be present in one situation, one scenario in which they are centered, and those of us who are not those of us who are not black in the room are decentered? There must be a strange phenomenon going on, and I want to know and understand what is it that would foster this at a school that has such great values, at a school that has such well-meaning and kind and nice, friendly students, and most of all, that is located in such a liberal space. We go down and take the 55 bus down to Kennedy Plaza and then walk over to RISD or Brown, and this will not be an issue coming up. People made fun of me for taking on this position, though I was excited to go do so, and it had to do with the anti-blackness at this school. So today I would like you all to jump in with me. You'll see my epileptic self as I'm starting to shake as I go, and my physical body is having a reaction to the thought about the absence of blackness here. I'm testifying to the ways in which this has brought about real pain for me, but most of all for the students I've talked to, who we will go and talk about their first scenarios coming through. But with that, I want to take the time to thank the Black Studies Department for giving me this postdoc and for allowing me the chance to speak. I want to thank my partner, Chanel, for flying all the way up from North Carolina to make sure I got this done on time. And I want to also thank all of you, those of you who have shown up. When I was trying to describe Providence College to another peer of mine, I said, this is a space of a bubble that's even more so a bubble than Swarthmore College, more so than Carleton and so forth. And that's not because of any sort of ignorance on the part of the students, but simply because something about this space fosters a divide between the outside world, whatever that might mean, and those of us who are on here today. But now I'm going to go and make a point that needs to be heard and understood. If any of us leave this talk having heard the words and voices of your classmates and fellow students, but do not take some kind of concrete action, you have failed your mission as a Providence student, failed these descriptions that I keep reading about on the website, failed the Father Sicard's messages that come up and seem to go and be a constant message throughout convocation and graduation. This is not the word and voice message simply of a black male person here. This is a voice and message coming from Providence. And if I could already hear that mission and sentiment ring forth, but I see a gap between the two, then we as members of the Providence community are not doing what we need to do to uphold to that title, to that very title our school is going and opposing from. So with that, I'm going to go and begin our talk. But then you read in Black Liberal Arts, the Western Canon, and the Fight Against Racism at Providence College. We're going to begin with a quote by the greatest genius of our modern era.
You think your pain and your heartbreak are unprecedented in the history of the world. But then you read. It was books that taught me that the things that tormented me the most were the very things that connected me with all the people who were alive or who had ever been alive.
This clip is taken from Karen Thorsten's documentary biography of James Baldwin called The Price of the Ticket. taken from the name of one of his edited essay collections. James Baldwin is now a token name everywhere. People can hear it, they can refer to it. White people know him because he wrote Giovanni's Room. If I go and tell a white person that I wrote my dissertation about James Baldwin, almost the first thing they will tell me is I love Giovanni's Room. Sorry, a white liberal, let me be specific about it. If I go and talk to a white progressive, they will demonstrate their wokeness by going and citing The Fire next time, or maybe they'll go and cite one of the essays from Nobody Knows My Name. But for the most part, there is a raw, sensual, visceral James Baldwin who transcends race, but is oftentimes engaged with because he is seen as himself as bearing witness. Taking this tradition from the black church, a witness goes and observes someone else as they testify. If the students right here in front of me decided they wanted to go and speak up to their glory and bear witness to some moment of grace shared by God, if I sit there and silently listen, eventually feeling the Spirit with them, I might clap, I might snap, and so forth. That back and forth, that dialogic connection between the testifier and the witness is essential for passing on a message. It doesn't matter if I have a story to tell or some event to pass on if there is no one to hear it from me. And again, why is it that on a school so rich with humanistic discourse, so rich with resources, so rich with a sense of community anchored in a Catholic tradition, why are there no witnesses to the testimonies and the pain that I've heard from my black students that I've encountered? What does it say that there are only 2 black students in my class in Intro to Black Studies, and that when one of them is not there, the present is felt, their missing presence is felt dramatically? I see the 2 of them in here today, and it was fascinating. I was itching, just waiting. Oh, I hope student X and student Y come in, because otherwise I will just feel less alone. And that is absurd to think about. Again, why should I feel awkward or uncomfortable in a space like this? I've gone to one of the elite private schools in the country. I went to Swarthmore College. I went to the University of Chicago. I should never feel any insecurity at an institution of higher learning. But when I come to Providence campus, there's something about this space that says, Paul, you need to go back home, go back to Providence proper, and get out of this place, because this is not fully there and made open for you. And the fact that I could go and feel that in my body, and then had to sit down one day and think about my students who had to go through this, was a heartbreaking experience that has gone and still racked my brain since that first evening when we had the faculty, staff, black student mixer. Again, another event that was supposed to be open to the public, but at which more faculty and staff showed up than black students. This is not okay. So we go and we see that there's an aspect to this that you might hear in my voice, and that's a sentiment of pessimism, a sense that, wow, things just cannot get better. How can me as an individual, I'm here as a postdoc, I don't have tenure. At this point, I'm not on the tenure track, but you can tell the Black Studies Department to go give me a job, and maybe I will get one. How can I go and think to solve a structural issue that has nothing to do with my presence here in a broader sense? I could be gone next year, I could be gone, who knows, 2 years from now. I could get a position and stay, but it means very little or so forth. How can we go and respond to this aspect? The key is by taking up an optimistic aspect and perspective that we cannot drop. One thing that James Baldwin would talk about consistently is that he couldn't give up on the world because he needed to understand that there needed to be some future for children and young people. Well, I'm going to go make this statement. I'm going to say it over and over again. You are the young people he was speaking about. Right now, I'm 33. Every day I get up, my body feels less and less young, less and less robust, less and less able to go and do the things it can. But I get to campus 3 days a week and then do office hours on the 4th, and I see a vibrance coming from you all that is just missing in my millennial generation now that we are worn up. But what will be fascinating is I'll talk to my students in office hours or sometimes in class, and they'll say, oh, we can't do anything, we can't help it. How is that true? To go and cite Baldwin again, I'm sorry, you're just going to see him come up over and over again. We are in the most powerful country in the world. We are in a space of elite privilege, elite resources. If any of you wanted to, if your parents are paying full tuition, you could drop out of school right now, take the $80,000 that it comes to do so, and feed a family for years. Now, I'm not saying go ahead and do so, but I use that as an illustration to demonstrate the power wrapped up in each of your aspects coming through. The The minute you get a degree from Providence College, no matter how poor or hard, how much hardship you came from, you are a member of the elite class that Trump is going and speaking about, that Kamala Harris tried to dissociate and distance herself from, that we see AOC decry and Bernie Sanders, and then, that we see various other people just relish in imagining coming through. There's nothing wrong with privilege and opportunity. There's something wrong with not taking those to go make a just sense of justice in the world. And again, this is not a foreign concept to Providence because we are a Catholic institution honored in that tradition, especially anchored both in the Dominican tradition and by taking notions from Thomas Aquinas. Thank you, Eve. One thing that finds an interesting space, however, is where do we find the blackness in such an anchored liberal arts type space like this? I don't see a Department of Kemet Studies. I don't see a Department of African Studies. I don't see a department of so many other things. The liberal arts as we know them are anchored in an Enlightenment tradition and that goes back to the 16th, 17th century, coming through this, and even before that to a classical education given to Roman nobility and in some ways to Greek nobility, though if you talk to your classics professors, you'll see that the Greek nobility were not fancy people and they did problematic stuff, so they were not actual living in the spirit of the liberal arts. This is coming from a Western tradition, and again, there is nothing wrong with it. I see one of my students, a Black Canadian, no matter what she and I want to say, we are deeply Western. Our life is anchored in this Western world, and there's nothing to go and decry it, but something about the liberal arts being presented as something universal doesn't quite match up when its historical context leaves out the anchors and the figures that go and can give us a deeper sense of who we are. I remember thinking at one point when I was 5 or 6, I told my dad, I'm not black, I'm brown. And I remember him, a graduate of Morehouse College, a prominent HBCU, looked at me, he glared at me, and said, "What, Paul?" And I said, "I'm not black, I'm brown. I don't want to keep calling myself black." He turned around and just kept watching TV. Weeks later, I realized I did not want a single one of my rich white classmates to come to my house because my parents' house was full of black art and literature, and it just did not seem fancy enough for the space in which I came through, for the school in which I went to. May my parents rest in peace, but after they passed away, or a little bit, years before that, but especially after they passed away, I realized something. The grandson of a peanut farmer from North Carolina, and that impoverished black woman who went on to get into the University of Pennsylvania and then teach Madeleine Albright's grandson and various other prominent figures, had gone and created a liberal arts space in our house more regal and prominent than some of the richest classmates I had. Whereas Beau Johns and Colin Eggy, they had beautiful paintings on their walls that were either duplicates of famous paintings or seemed, I guess, just sentimental and beautiful enough to be applauded. My father had pictures from Romare Bearden, Jacob Lawrence, various Howard University artists all coming through. There were books in our house nonstop, but they were references to Toni Morrison. But the fact that because they were black figures, whether in the pictures or in the names, my young self could just not comprehend this as a sense of liberal arts, cultured refinement that is necessary. And I receded deeply into a place of shame. I'm going to suggest that that is that same sense of shame that goes and leaves black students for not feeling fully comfortable at this place. I want us to think about something here. You're going to come and you're going to be a white student sitting in a room full, as someone's going and giving a lecture. You might look at your phone. It might be boring to you. You might have all this disingenuous aspect. And that's fine. We can't all hold our attention span for a deep regard. But I know for a fact, having been that black student, that if I pull out my phone while listening to a talk about Thomas Aquinas, or about listening to Heidegger, I will be looked at as you are just not smart enough to keep up with this text, with this talk. But then I'm going to think in the same way, because I have given talks like this before. I've seen white students pull out their phone while I'm talking about James Baldwin, Ralph Ellison, Toni Morrison, Franz Fanon. And with all due respect to even the most brightest person in the world, those figures cannot fully be understood without deep attention. No one would dare go and think that that white male student, my PhD colleague who I love so much, who does not pay attention when I talk about Baldwin, is not intelligent enough for James Baldwin. But it is sure true that when he is talking about Heidegger, he is looking dismissively at me, assuming that I don't know enough about that German phenomenologist who started out as a Catholic, converted, and had to go through deep existential crimes and so forth. There's a strange aspect to this liberal arts discourse that I'm talking about. When you're black, and to quote W.E.B. Du Bois, you see things through a second sight, I guarantee you, the people back there in that seat, these people here have a deeper insight, not because they're black in terms of some ontological being way, but simply because their experiences offer them a deeper insight into certain realities that we can't speak to. I see a number of women in this room. The same is true of you all as you deal with gender dynamics, but again, I wonder to myself, where are the black people to offer that second sight and come in? And I say again, there must be something about this space that fosters a sense of dis-ease, one, to the speaker of the talk, but two, to the black students who don't feel fully coming in here. There are three responses and engagements to the liberal arts that seem prominent to me. The first one I found here at Providence College. It's taken from the website of the Development of Western Civilization program. You'll explore that in human history through many perspectives, from literature to philosophy to theology to art and more. WDC will change the way you look at you see the world by teaching you to find connections between seemingly unconnected ideas. Just as important, it teaches you to think, and that will prepare you to make history. Here we see an emphasis on connecting ideas. There's an assumption, whether or not good or bad, that there are a set of ideas coming up in the world that we can draw and connect to by going and looking at their historical text from which they came. I've looked at almost all of the syllabi for DWC for the past 10 years. Most of the same texts are taught over and over again, whether in those fascinating symposiums you have for DWC, the 200 level, or those just classic great books, texts that I love so much. I want to make clear I have no issue with this Western civilization. There's a picture of Socrates above my bed, and I have a Socrates doll that I sleep with every once in a while when stressed out. But those figures, to me, they speak in that sense that PC has talked about. They speak and they draw ideas that are above us. And while I can have an imagining of what Socrates was like, what he looked like, how he behaved on his last days, there's something that keeps those liberal arts ideas away from fully being embodied with me, because I can remember that they are ideas that are connecting forth, as opposed to something that goes and speaks to my spirit on a deeper way, which we'll go and unpack that later. On the other hand comes from my PhD program, the UChicago's Committee on Social Thought. There, the idea is not about some canon. It's about fundamental texts. They're just certain texts that go and speak with us and make us feel fundamental ideas about what it means to be a human being. It's not the ideas that provoke us or that we're searching for. It's engagement with the materials themselves that bring up those ideas. This leads to intense debates between UChicago students for hours and hours, and for that reason, I strongly encourage none of you to go to the Committee on Social Thought if you have any desire to get a PhD. That's for sure. I'm glad I got out, or I'm glad I survived. Maybe I'll put it that way. To quote the website from the Committee on Social Thought, the serious study of academic topics is best prepared for by a wide and deep acquaintance with the fundamental issues presupposed in all those studies. Again, there's a sense of fundamental works that come here. And as a result, there are people in my former department who study film, who study artwork, who study poetry, music, the list goes on, from all over the world, going in with the assumption that we can access these fundamental issues and decipher them by engaging with the text. Sadly, what is the University of Chicago known for? Its deep whiteness. And to be quite honest, my friend Uday and I are the first two people to write about black people in the entire history of our PhD program. It breaks my heart to think that we were on a campus smack dab in the middle of the South Side, with black people all around us, and there was an exclusion coming here. I come to Providence and I think, wow, this is such a multicultural, diasporic town, and I see that I'm back in Hyde Park, feeling that same UChicago presence of who belongs here and who doesn't, because somehow this school seems separate from the neighborhood, but deeply with deep sense of ownership of what's going on here. But again, do I have claim to that, and even more so, even more important, to my students? Lastly, I think there's a black liberal arts perspective to this, and I'll go and draw from the words of Nobel laureate Toni Morrison. If there's a book you want to read, but it hasn't been written yet, then you must write it. Here there's a constructive aspect. We all know those fundamental questions, whether or not we're going to die soon, how to go handle grief, what does it mean to love a person, how can you make a choice between two impossible decisions, do you support your friend or do you support your country, the list goes on. And Morrison's argument is instead of relying solely on these other texts, go put your ideas first, go suggest your fundamental ideas, and then go and connect them. This kind of inversion of a typical view that we're seeing from the two, dare I call them, white definitions of fundamental works and canon, come from a simple reality coming through this. When you're black, you do not have a text and canon to go build off of, and that's just absolutely the truth. Please do me a favor. Who here has felt seen in DWC, which is an incredible curriculum. I have no problem with the curriculum of DWC, but who here is a person of color who feels seen in that curriculum? And I bring this up because the texts do not go and exclude our experience. We are all from the West, to be quite honest. As far as I know, there are not very many international exchange students here at Providence College. So what could there be to go and keep people from feeling as though they have access to it? I would argue it is a sense that they cannot build upon that tradition. There's a certain kind of comfort that comes when you're a straight white man from privilege and you can go into a classroom knowing you're going to read about Plato and Aristotle and so forth, with the assumption, oh, well, they're like me, this is my stuff, I don't want to be in this class, I want to go and take Accounting 204 or take how to run a business or whatever other non-liberal arts courses that you business major people take. Well, I shouldn't throw shade at the business school, but with that stuff coming through, on the other hand, it is fascinating when you do surveys, some of the most engaged students in canonical works are people of color, because they are sent with a situation of where do I fit in relation to Plato? One, if we saw a picture of Plato, he would not look like the pale-faced people we imagine him to be when we go and look at pictures in all those classical galleries in Rome and especially in London and so forth. No, he's going to look closer to me or closer to some of the dark-skinned people in this room. Socrates had epilepsy as far as we know. We can go in if we imagine any of these figures, and this can go on, but there is something weird in which you have to go find yourself and put yourself into that position. And I wonder, what does it mean, again, for a set of text written for a certain population at this school to be least engaged with, again, according to the testimonies I have heard from the mouths of these white male students themselves with white students? What might it mean for us to go and re-engage with this wonderful curriculum set up in DWC that doesn't quite yet seem to go and connect to people for whatever the reason might be? Here's where Black Studies comes in as an intervention for this aspect. It first started in the late 1960s in the wake of Martin Luther King's assassination and the various protests and frustrations at the inadequacies of the Civil Rights Acts in the 1960s. I want us to imagine a turmoil on college campuses which goes beyond just protesting Vietnam. I want you to imagine that, I don't know, Naya, I want you to imagine that you came, you wrote out a whole list of demands with your friends about how you wanted the school to change. Somehow, despite not having text message or whatever, you sent those demands over to people in California, and somehow a grounded network of people on the ground have come together and established, we want a new field of studies to support black people, to go and enfranchise black people outside the university, and also to go and make black presence seen and more prominent here. As someone pointed out the other night as I was talking to them, any black studies program that came in the 90s or the 2000s is a relatively young black studies program. This is a discipline that has existed for decades, but it's interesting to see the ways in which, when shared with people who might not necessarily thought about it, they're surprised. They think this is a new gimmick, something coming out of critical race theory, something gone and conspired against that stuff. And it's interesting, again, to think, when I'm going to step back and make this assertion, of the most prominent people in the United States in the second half of the 20th century in terms of thinkers, writers, and so forth. Almost all of them have either been women or people of color. I can't think off the top of my head of a white prominent figure, a white great musician, a white great leader, anything of that sort, who is taken in terms of their production of liberal arts type work, who is not in some way marginalized and so forth. So shouldn't this be the center of our liberal arts discourse? Shouldn't this be the center of those spaces? And while DWC has had fascinating colloquia that address that, my question comes in, and I don't have data or access. How many students take those seminars, the ones on queerness, the ones on sex and gender, the ones that do deal directly with race? What has our country produced and contributed, if not the work of brilliant people of color, especially brilliant black people like the ones I'm seeing in the class in this room today? Black studies goes and draws from a ton of sources, many of which don't seem academic. Some of it comes from the vernacular. That's why you'll see spaces like hip-hop studies and jazz studies going and engaging and trying to decipher how black people go and speak on the regular in an everyday manner. Others of it is academic, and it's written by boring people like me, and you can go read journal articles and zone out. In some cases, it's creative and just beautiful, coming through with different artists. There are so many Black Studies programs that have residencies, and I can't wait to see as the Black Studies program here at Providence expands, what artists and such they get to come through, especially given the strong arts scene here in Providence. Again, there's some discourse on pop culture that comes in. Beyonce is a constant figure in Black Studies programs and classrooms. She's going and seen as a major figure. I'm sorry to anyone who loves Taylor Swift, but no one has left more of an impact on pop culture than Beyonce. That's just a fact. And it's something fascinating to think about, that she will have a presence in a classroom continuously. A few years ago, an article came out about Taylor Swift being the voice of my generation's my generation's feminism, of millennial feminism. And an outcry came out all throughout Black Twitter and Black Instagram saying, how can that be true? Taylor Swift doesn't represent what we think as Black women and so forth. Now, I didn't have a right to speak, so I just watched it, but to see the eruption and response was fascinating to me. Taylor Swift, there might be a class every once in a while. I think one was taught at Yale or something like that recently. But Beyonce is on syllabi everywhere, and it raises a question: what about her engagement with pop culture makes her less regal, less refined, less deep to come on than someone like Taylor Swift? This is not a comparison of their quality. This is a comparison of impact and resonance around in certain things. And it raises a question. If Beyonce were white and being taught in those gender and sexuality studies courses, separate from Black studies, would she go and be seen as regal? Is there something about Black studies appreciation for the everyday that goes and closes this out? I'd say yes. And I want to point out why. I want us to think about a time in which we've entered classroom and some Black person came into class speaking through Ebonics or African American vernacular English. If they are an immigrant, if they spoke with an accent, someone who's just going or shy and they have a soft voice. And I want us to go and think about whether or not our first reaction was not, wow, they're not too smart, or wow, I guess their school must be hard, they must be on a scholarship. I'm not making this up. I can see some eyes roll. But this has been studied and proven. I don't need to go and give the sentiments to this. And I ask us again to wonder what would put us on the defensive to even hesitate and question that. This is something to think about, especially if we think about those of us who are rolling our eyes, those of us who are men, those of us who are cis, the list goes on and on. At the same time, there is a sense of canon in the Black studies. We need to read Du Bois, we need to read Sojourner Truth, we need to read Ida B. Wells, Audre Lorde. There is a desire to go and establish these are the key texts that set up how we think about Blackness and how we think about Blackness's manifestation in the world. And then there's, to me, my favorite section, and that is the sense of ancestry, the idea that someday, when Dr. Scott retires, there will be people who will look at Dr. Scott and see her as their scholarly ancestor, will cite her work not simply in Dr. Scott said X, Y, and Z in her paper released in 2024, But no, Dr. Scott smiled at me and exposed me to this book and to this concept of intersectionality, and as a result, now I'm studying this because of her. If we think about it, how many of us truly feel comfortable, say, giving a hug to one of our professors, or going and doing anything more than calling them Dr. Blank or Professor Blank? This is not to go and shake up the sentiment of Providence College and its great sense of respect. It is a beautiful thing here to see the ways in which students go and honor their professors. That is not the case at my partner and I's alma mater, Swarthmore. They'll find something to protest every 5 days. But there's a sense of ancestral community and love that flows through Black studies and that is present. I'll go to an academic conference like the American Academy of Religion. Everyone will be strict with their arms next to their side, and everything will be rather boring, to be quite honest. Then I'll go to a Black Studies conference of any sort, and there will definitely be dancing, sentiments of livelihood, people going and hugging and kissing each other on the cheek as though they're long-lost friends, even though they just met. And this sense of community and love, this ancestral connection goes and makes Black Studies a space that kind of goes and disrupts the normativity of the white university. Now I'm going to go and offer this again. Who would not want to go and have at least one class where you can sit back, relax, and enjoy yourself just a teeny bit while still reading depressing stuff about slavery or existential crises or so forth, in addition to our math classes and things that are more regal and such? But I'm going to go and make this contention. Stepping outside the bounds of those strictnesses and those categories are deeply uncomfortable, and it takes something to push us outside of it. Today, the ancestor that I will draw upon will be my hero, James Baldwin, who went and operated understanding these principles before the Black Studies programs really started to develop and had withdrawn mostly from the public sphere by the time Black Studies became a prominent academic discipline. To go and connect us, there's a central element that he defined as marking all human life, and that's sensuality. To quote him directly, in all jazz and especially the blues, there's something ironic and tart, authoritative and double-edged. The force of the sensual, and to be sensual, I think, is to respect and rejoice in the force of life itself, to be present in all that one does, from the effort of loving to the breaking of bread. Here, James Baldwin's referring to his comparisons of the white church and the Black church. Even those of us who haven't been to a Black Christian service, I think, have some archetypal idea in our head of Black Christians clapping, cheering, speaking in tongues depending on the church and so forth. Or you can go with me to my Episcopalian church. Again, we'll sit with our arms at the side. We'll get up and stand up when the priest tells us to. We won't even know exactly why we're reading certain passages when we're doing so, and there will be little back and forth between us and the engagement. Do I want to go leave my Episcopal background? No, I love it profusely, but I do have to admit there is a lack of sensuality in there. Baldwin's point, and this is a fascinating aspect to point out, is that when you are Black and your life seems terrible, when at any point you can be shot, you can be sold, you can go and be abused, you can be blamed for crimes you have not committed, it takes a certain degree of irony and courage to just say, I'm going to live my life despite the fact that tomorrow I could die. This is what goes and defines the blues. This is what goes and defines Negro spirituals. If you go read the lyrics of so many jazz standards, you'll see that many of them are about depressing topics, but when we listen to jazz, almost all the time, the music goes and has us jumping around, enjoying the beat and so forth. Why would you go and dance to Billie Holiday singing a song like All of Me, where she's talking about how she's on the brink of killing herself, when this song goes and has been used and reinterpreted to talk about suicidal episodes in different Black novels and so forth, but again, it's such a popular song that I can't use it in presentations anymore because its copyright is so heavy that they take it down every time I've gone and tried to use her lyrics. This sensual aspect, however, while it might sound great in a quote, sensuality is scary. Sensuality is that aspect we see in children up until the age around 7 or 6 when they start becoming self-conscious. Sensuality is what leads a little child to want to go and touch a fire because it looks beautiful, be told, no, don't touch that, son. Then they're going to go back and touch it again, burn their hand, and while they should know after being burnt that they shouldn't touch it again, something about the allure of their senses, the sight, the smell, the crackling sounds, has them pulling back again. Black people, for a variety of reasons, mostly both because of our oppression, but also because we can't set the norms of society, are deeply sensual. Why are you going to go and do classical music in a standard, dare I say, boring way, if you're not allowed to go and afford to go and get classical instrument musician type training? Instead, you'll go and you'll play something raw like jazz. Instead, you'll go and pick up rhythm from hip-hop beats on the street. And this is continuously an aspect of how black people have gone and adapted, especially in the United States. Baldwin says, well, white people might think there's something crass and rudimentary to that. No, there's something beautiful about stepping into that sensual space. At the same time, because we're so afraid of the sensual, Baldwin has his map of how he thinks the world works and why it leads down to this. The first aspect that comes through is there's just a deep fear of the sensual reality. Yes, Friday, my students broke my heart in Black Studies 101. We played Stevie Wonder, and none of them were willing to tap their fingers, to clap their hands, tap their feet, whatever. When I taught the same song last year at Carleton, everyone got up and we were all dancing around, having an amazing time in the classroom. I don't think it's a coincidence, one, that Carleton, that it's such a loose school that people call their professors by their first name, but also my class at the time was filled with black students. BLS 101, the section I teach, is predominantly white, and while you all are brilliant, there is some aspect of sensuality missing, whether because of whiteness, whether because of the whiteness of Providence College, but sensuality is lacking. And while sensuality need not be present all the time, there is something strengthening about stepping outside oneself and connecting with someone else. If you go out and dance, other people will join you, and there's something beautiful and calming and reassuring about that. But Baldwin says people are afraid of sensual reality. As a result, they go and they make categories. Rather than me going and getting to know the people in this front row, I'm going to make an assumption. Well, let's see, 2 of you are wearing Providence sweatshirts, and 2 of you are wearing jackets and sweaters. 3 of you wearing jackets and sweaters. The jacket and sweater crew, you guys are just nerds and smarter than everyone else. And the 2 of you in the Providence sweatshirts, you must be athletes, and you must not actually be at Providence because you want to get an education. You're just here to go get a sport. These are the kind of off-the-cuff, immediate reactions we have, because it would be much more uncomfortable, much more sensual for me to get to know each of the 5 individuals in front of me on a one-to-one basis. Instead, let's go create a category. It need not be about race. It could be about anything. Again, just what kind of clothes someone's wearing. Let's put those ideas in our head and operate accordingly. As a result, though, we started making assumptions about what categories are like. And this is what goes and leads to, dare I say, I think one of the issues on Providence's campus. Without a presence and a very visible sense of black people, creeping ideas about this categorical group of black students at Providence will naturally come up. There'll be misguided assumptions because there will be no one to engage sensually with the people who have the assumptions coming on. And as a result, narratives get scripted. As a result, suddenly institutions take a role. They start pushing those measures. Then the social divides become entrenched. At this case, that might mean that a future black student starting in the class of 2029 next year will come in and not know where they're supposed to go operate and find themselves lost and so forth because they don't fit into a set of categories established long before they came. Lastly, that just leads to a sense of social fear and hate of those of us who are different, both on the part of the oppressed and on the part of the oppressor, and as a result, that just leads to the cycle of fear of sensuality again. Baldwin sees only one way to go and intervene in this, and that is to bear testimony. If I tell my story, if you tell your story, no one can deny that reality, and the minute we start to talk honestly about what we've experienced, our sensuality will come up. This is why people cry when they start talking about their lives. This is why I'm shaking now here. This is why we go and also sometimes don't even have the courage to tell our parents something, because it takes true engagement with our true feeling and inner self to go and speak in a sensual way. Baldwin's thought is if we tell the story, however, we can go break it down in 3. 1, we can make a private claim about how we ourselves are feeling. As I said, no one can deny our personal experience. Someone can say, oh, you got the facts right, facts wrong if you're testifying on something. But in terms of how you experience those facts, that is true for you, and no one can say otherwise. It doesn't matter who you are. You You can go couple those private truths with a categorical claim about how the world does or should work. Okay, white people do this, black people do this. The key aspect about this categorical claim is that one not invest in believing that it's true. Baldwin's points when he makes categorical claims is that society leads white people to behave as such, or black people to behave as such, or people to seek out queerness in fascinating ways. He makes no presumption to know how everyone is. Lastly, he'll come with a post-categorical truth, and these are claims that go and paint a model of what he would like the world to look like. And these quotes and in these passages, he stops talking about any kind of markers such as gender, race, sexuality, and the like, and he wants to go and offer in a vision. There is one mutuality and one convergent point that we see between Providence's college's mission and Baldwinism, and that is this post-categorical aspect. As the Christian church, the Providence goes and looks to a broader, beloved community in which these divisions don't necessarily make sense. So we can simply go and address the issues that we're thinking about by looking to PC's mission and perhaps nuancing it with a little bit of black. Here we see two statements written by black students in response to racism at Providence College. The first was written almost 50 years ago by students in the wake of the civil rights movement going and expressing their discontent. They want a black dorm, they want a guarantee for safety, they want to make sure there are black classes, more black professors. And then if we look at the passage written in 2020, so 4 years ago, the same complaints and claims are made. There is very little difference. The only difference is that one is written in more of a vernacular because it's clear a bunch of students got together on their typewriter and typed that out, whereas the one in 2020 was composed well and they probably got help from a professor who won't share their name or something like that. As I talked to people and did the interviews for the talk, I saw that there were clear aspects and symptoms that go and mark the racism here. One I've spoken often about, it's the lack of diversity. Two, it's that sense of black alienation that, again, if I just look around the room, the black people are sitting on the margins of the classroom. There is literal self-segregation around us. We don't even need to go and point this out. What is it that has led the black people to sit over here in this corner, despite this being a talk about black experience at Providence College? This is a simple question. I don't have the answer, but it's something to consider and to think about, and this is a representation of that black alienation. That other aspect is a sense of black despair. This is the feeling that hit me when I walked on campus one school I'd started, I guess, a week in, and wondered again, do I belong here? Again, I've seen some of my people's eyes roll their eyes when I've given this speech. 2 white students dropped my class the first day when I brought this point up, and I remember laughing to myself in some regard. Isn't it ironic in a blues-like way, just like Baldwin said, that 2 white male students, presumably cis, would go and get offended and uncomfortable because a black teacher told them he's not going to put up with racism in Intro to Black Studies 101, and that he didn't feel comfortable at Providence, so he was going to make his classroom a room of safety. What would it take for 2 seniors to drop a class and flee to something else? It was a fascinating phenomenon. I don't remember their faces well enough, so they could be in this room, but it's an interesting case study, an interesting social phenomenon to think about. At the same time, there's a fascinating, paradoxical relationship between the idea of Catholic tradition that this school is so wonderfully dedicated to and the social realities that are experienced. On the one hand, this idea of Catholic tradition, in order to go and sustain a history that it looks a certain way, has gone and tried to maintain as best as possible the kind of community that Providence has experienced in the past. But I'm sorry to bring one realization. You cannot have a community from the past in 2024. You can't have it both ways. It's either one or the other. But there's nothing to say that we can't go and enrich the Catholic tradition and make it a little bit more colorful. I'm sorry, at one point they had to ask themselves when they were appointing the new pope, do we get the pope from Africa? Because there is a large, increasing number of black Catholics in Africa, and maybe we need to go and speak to that. Now we have popes coming from Latin America where there's diversity coming through. There is no need to go and maintain a sense of Catholic tradition that does not go and mark the rainbows of the people coming through, especially if we are all created in God's image, as I deeply believe, and as I assume almost everyone who subscribes to Catholicism here believes. At the other sense, and this is one of the most fascinating to me, just my interest in academic interest in politics, there's a constant general understanding throughout institutions that once black people start complaining, other groups will start joining in and complaining about their circumstances too. And suddenly the floodgates will open and there will be a space of just deep discontent. This has been proven time and time again. You go look at any social movement in the United States, and I guarantee you parts and aspects of it were inspired first because black men or black women took action to speak out against some aspect of anti-racism. Does that mean that anti-black racism is more important than any other form of liberation? No. But there is something tied into our country's history that seems to often go and give blackness as the first, anti-racism for black people as the first springboard. And it will have to go and lead the college to raise questions. Well, if we do go and respond to black students' needs, then we might need to start thinking about queer students. And we need to think about how we engage with women and the list could go on and on. So why not go and keep the floodgates from opening up by keeping a sense of alienation and despair and separation that comes naturally at this school? I speak not from a position of decrying. I've only been here 2.5 months. I speak having been bearing witness to the stories that I've heard from black students. I'm sorry. There is one cure to this, and this is a sentiment I think we can all get behind, as corny as it might sound, and that is unity and love. With the little bit of time we have left, I want to go and give 2 case studies and then wrap it up, or 3 case studies and wrap it up. The first is a statement that came from a black male senior at the black faculty, staff, and student mixer. He looked at us in the eye and he said to us, "They pay us to come here. That's why we're at this school." I want you all, those of you who are students, to imagine and think about what it must mean to spend 4 years at this institution and to tell a new professor the only reason I'm at this school is because they gave me money. I have no sense of ownership of this place. I do not feel comfortable. I was bought here. I'm going to go and point out another social phenomenon that involved paying black people to be present in a space, and that's slavery. And while I'm not going to go and suggest that Providence College is a space of slavery, there was something just deeply saddening to hear a student go and use such similar terminology to go and discuss their experience. It also sounded like, from me talking to the young man, that he was involved in so many service opportunities, that he was a student leader in a number of ways, but he still felt no claim to the space coming on. I think he might even have been wearing a PC sweatshirt. But to still feel as though the only reason he was at that school is because he was being paid was a response coming through. He seemed to feel as though there was no sense of hope or anything. And then I realized, coming through this, and this sparked the idea for the talk, my friend had gone and spoken just like Socrates in Plato's Phaedrus, going and talking about how important it is to speak the truth. By going and offering that one little statement, he had me go, and I had to reformat the whole Black Studies intro syllabus for next semester as a result of his comment, to go and think about this. And the very fact that he would go and testify and speak to his pain meant, according to the DWC curriculum and website, he had gone and demonstrated true Providence College-type courage and insight coming through. So if this black man could take ownership of DWC by proxy and then somehow go and bear truth to it, there had to be wisdom and amazingness coming through there. But at the same time, to go and connect something like a Socratic idea to going and changing the world, especially with regards to social identity issues like racism, we need to have an avenue. And this, again, is where the black liberal arts comes in. Here we have an excellent figure in the case of Audre Lorde, a black feminist, lesbian poet who died in the 1990s due to cancer. To quote her from this page, from her essay, The Transformation of Silence into Action, which was written in her memoir about getting breast cancer. And the speaking will get easier and easier. You'll find that you have fallen in love with your own vision, which you may never have realized you had. And you will lose some friends and lovers, and you realize you don't miss them. And new ones will find you and cherish you. And at last you'll know with the surpassing certainty that the only one thing that is more frightening than speaking your truth, and that is not speaking. There's something, again, of the sense of respect at this school that is so touching. But at the same time, I do get a sense that students of all colors do not always feel comfortable speaking their truth. Why not go and use Lord, couple that with Socrates, and go use that as a vision, both to go break open the floodgates and allow for black truth to come out, but for any of those of us who are non-black in this space to go and speak their truth as well. When a professor goes and gives us a mark that we're not quite sure about, when a friend or a classmate goes and says something deeply problematic, the truth should be spoken up, and we can find avenues to it through the very curriculum offered by PC. The next one came from a freshman student. She and I laughed about this. I was going and I was calling a friend, and I pointed out none of the PC students look me in the eye when we're walking by. They just walk straight past me, and it's not as though they're shy like at UChicago. At this point in the year, UChicago students are so depressed they can't look up more than half an inch. But I don't see that. I see joy on the faces of PC students. And at first, oh, Paul, you're just being oversensitive. But when I left a voice message on my best friend's phone and said, yeah, I don't think they look on me. I feel like I'm in Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. A student heard me, a black student overheard me. She was a freshman, and she said, yeah, they don't look at me either. She cracked up, and while I give her a great sense of grace for the blues-like irony and humor she showed, why should a freshman be thinking that only 2 months into their time at Providence College? This is college. This is supposed to be the best 4 years of your life, and to take an attitude, to have to take an attitude of humor at the idea that people walk by her, brush by her, and don't make her feel seen is something deeply tragic and deeply unsuggestive of the beloved community that I know we all want. So we can go and think about this through a lens of Dostoevsky, whose text, The Brothers Karamazov, is considered on at least 2 of the 200-level DWC curriculum. In order to make the world anew, people themselves must turn onto a new, different path psychically. Until one has indeed become the brother of all, there will be no brotherhood. This is coupled with Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, a book inspired by Dostoevsky himself. When people think of Invisible Man, they think of the book of a narrative of a bright young black man who hides underground and takes a bitter attitude towards the rest of the world. But people who've read that book seem to miss the key aspect, or didn't focus on that aspect, including younger me, miss the key aspect of that book. And that is the fact that at the end of the novel, the Invisible Man, having realized that his fight against racism means engaging other people, comes out from his hole, climbs back out into Manhattan, and goes and experiences the world through love. To quote the narrator at the end of the book, I sell you no phony forgiveness. I'm a desperate man, but too much of your life will be lost, its meaning lost, unless you approach it as through love as through hate. So I approach it through division. I denounce and I defend and I hate and I love. I bring this quote up because it suddenly led me to realize, no, while the blues-like sorrow that the student demonstrated when I talked to her was, yes, depressing. Again, no freshman should be thinking this only 2 months into their time at college. There was something about her willingness to keep engaging with the other students. There was no bitterness or enmity or hate. She seemed to have balanced out whatever might have drawn those potentials to come through. She demonstrated in a fascinating way, just like the senior student demonstrated by speaking truth, that this balance of division of love can come through. The black people are here today. They have shown up. It takes a certain degree of courage to go and push back your anger and frustration and show yourself present to the people that might be responsible for your oppression. They have gone, but as a result, by holding it out, they have demonstrated an act of love. And now the question, raised both by the narrator of the book, raised by Dostoevsky, is will the other people in the classroom go and respond with love and acceptance and pushing forth too? The last quote came from one of my students in Black Studies 101, as she and I have talked extensively about the experiences she experienced. When a student pointed out that a racist incident had happened in the dorm, in addition to the various ones she had seen as an RA, she said out loud, "We can't have anything." Her first reaction after saying this, though, was to apologize. And I looked at her and said, "Why are you apologizing to me? Why are you apologizing for your frustration and anger about the..." And she, I don't want people to think I'm mad. The fact that she would even feel some degree of guilt for expressing her displeasure over a racist incident, a very racist incident occurring, goes and speaks to something about the silencing and alienation. Her heritage as a Dominican woman means she is saturated with black blood in fascinating ways that I hope one day you all will take a Black Studies course on to learn about just how fascinating the Spanish Caribbean is. The professor, Dr. Wheeler, is right there. She can go teach you all about it. But this is coming on, and it just racked my brain again to think about the ways in which she had been taught to push down her anger. I suddenly thought, okay, which saint could go and connect with this? Which Catholic person could I go and cite? And then it became clear, just pick Simone Weil, a person whose mystical musings which are so potent despite her experiences and the trauma she went through during the first half of the 20th century, but that she seems to have a great presence on campus here, especially between those who are interested in religion. To quote her, "To be rooted is perhaps the most important and least recognized of the human soul. My student did not feel rooted at PC when she made that claim. And there is something about being uprooted, despite her, in her case, being here 3 years, that cries out for a response to come." Phyllis Wheatley, a poet, one of the first published authors in one of the first Black Anglo writers and writers in the English language, went and had a similar sentiment as she came through. "Attend me, virtue, through my youthful years. Oh, leave me not to this field, to the false joys of time, but guide my steps to endless life and to bliss." Here, Wheatley is going and accepting the fact that she's been brought to the United States and she's been exposed to Christianity and that she can go and determine her sense of rootedness. Whereas Weil gives us one sense of why rootedness is needed, why my student needs to feel as though she owns Providence College just as much as anyone else, especially given her work as an RA, as a mentor to younger students, as a guide to me. At the same time, I need her to go and take a Wheatley-like attitude in which she can understand she can forge that rootedness that is so deeply necessary. But it should not fall on a junior to go and collect and create that space. It certainly should not fall on a junior of color, and it certainly should not fall on a junior woman of color as we keep adding and stacking the different identity markers. And I bet I could list more and more, but I will reveal her identity, so I'll avoid that. That being said, despite the pessimism that we have here, we have the opportunity to change things, and that is through the deep optimism that marks us all. Something led you all to come out on a Wednesday night to listen to some professor you've never heard of go and give a talk and rant on and on about racism and nerd out about the James Baldwin and Socrates and so on and so forth. That gives me optimism and hope. When you go and you bear witness to someone's testimony, you're demonstrating that you care enough for what they have to say and see that as so valuable that it must be shared and borne witness to. You all have done that for me as I've tried to go bear witness to those students' testimonies. I hope you will go and bear witness to the testimonies I've offered. I hope you'll go and integrate your own testimonies coming through. I hope you'll embrace sensuality sometime in class. I hope you'll go and understand to speak truth to power. And most of all, I hope you can understand to go create a sense of rootedness for your fellow students. We can go over concrete steps as to what to do and how to do so. I'm glad to answer questions about that. But on a first step, we need to go and establish of understanding how this Catholic tradition that we all subscribe to, whether nominally or in actual religious ideological belief, can be a path to changing it. There is no reason that this school of all institutions should be a space for alienation, despair, and black wonders of why we are here. No black student should feel they were paid to come here. No black student should feel like they don't have anything, and no black student should feel unseen. This is not an appropriate way in existence in 2024. And after, again, being here 2.5 months, I know the students and people here are too kind and loving to subscribe to that. But regardless, institutions are made up of people, to allude to James Baldwin. So that means if we're going to change the structure, it falls and starts with us. I guarantee you this, to those of you who are white in this room, if you go tomorrow and wake up and smile at a student of color, they might look at you strangely. Why is that student smiling at me? But later in the day, they will appreciate that. They will feel seen. They will feel more rooted, and they will tell that story, having commemorated you showing them love. That's a simple first step to going and bearing witness. Thank you. I don't know how questions will work exactly, but you said you wanted to use that mic?
Yeah, I have a microphone, so I can bring anyone a microphone if they have any questions.
I don't need the microphone, it's okay. Thank you. It's for the audio recording.
Oh, you're right, thank you.
So you said we can discuss solutions. Right, so that would be the natural next question then, wouldn't it? So that's the question I'm asking then.
And
The idea of solutions beyond seeing people, beyond acknowledging their presence. What's next after that?
well, the simplest thing coming from faculty is to integrate black material into the curriculum, but to make that explicit and clear on the syllabus in a way to show that this is inclusive of this. In the same way that I got to check my privilege this morning, my students, sorry, not my students, a guest lecturer in my class made me realize that I didn't put any black women on my Intro to Black Studies syllabus until the second half. The second half of it is littered with black women thinkers and so forth, but it didn't cross my mind that by waiting historically in that sort of way, I had undercut my students coming through. So those intentional kind of markers can make a difference. It's been demonstrated and proven through critical pedagogy research that just adding a line saying this class's syllabus will involve women of color, queer people, so on, that students will feel seen and they're more likely to step up. On the case of students, I think the biggest thing is there just needs to be an understanding that black students here are more than just the athletes. I think that is just very clear. I can't speak to how that should be demonstrated because you can ask my partner, she went to Swarthmore with me. I was just not the best socializer when it came to college, so I'm not a model in that regard, but a simple sense of friendship, a simple sense of outreach can go the difference. So that interpersonal thing, I think of Danielle Allen talking about Aristotle and friendship being a key aspect to the political setting and so forth. That sense of friendship can go a long way, and on the part of students, that isn't that hard to go and cultivate. But on the part of faculty and staff, syllabi are a simple resolution. I mean, I also have solutions for administration, but that's another separate question.
I'll ask that question. What your solutions are for administration?
I need administration to come to events like this. I don't want to go and act as though Swarthmore, Carrollton, et cetera, no, every institution has its issues. Again, the sense of respect here is amazing, and it does make me feel good in the classroom. But where are the top level administrators? There will be so few talks about racism, so few talks that will say at Providence, I crafted the talk not because I could go and bear some great witness and change everyone's life, but just so there could be a space where we talked about racism at Providence College. It's one thing to have someone talk about race and blackness in a very academic talk. I can see why someone wouldn't show up. But this is about the school. The invitation was sent to so where is that presence coming through? Where is that engagement in that discourse? It means nothing otherwise. Honestly, it's like it's like Baldwin, Lorraine Hansberry, Kenneth Clark, et cetera, all meeting with Robert F. Kennedy to have a meeting on how to resolve the Negro problem, and nothing actually happening because RFK saying his brother, president of the United States at the time, did not need to go and actually engage with the topic. Otherwise, it's platitude and it's talk. Again, despite knowing that these people are good people. But there is I understand they're complicated politics, but again, isn't the Catholic tradition radical in and of itself in every single aspect? So that's one question that comes from my Anglican tradition, Episcopalian mind. But that's the biggest thought, is the administration needs to show up.
Thank you for your boldness. This was a refreshing presentation, especially after the events of the past week. It was really remarkable.
Thank you.
Hello. I don't have a question. I just have a comment because it's on my heart and spirit right now to just honor you for your bravery and the beauty that you possess in this space to be centering blackness at a time like this, in a space like this, is not easy, but it is of value, so I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too, man. Thank you, and thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for an intriguing and very engaging presentation. I learned so much. Thank you. I'm one of the administrators and I'm here.
No, I know
And I know some others could have been here, but they had other things to do. I am really intrigued and I'm really happy that you presented voices of students. As you say, voices don't lie. When they say something, it means it's actually there. It is there. The students don't feel a sense of belonging. But I'm wondering if you attempted to talk to some of the white students to get their perspectives, and if not, why? Or are you going to do that?
Okay. As a Black Studies professor, the constant debate I get in every day is either you're too close to white people, or you're too far from, or you're not considering whiteness in the Western world enough. If we were at another institution where there was more discourse from Black students, I think I would have gone and maybe brought in more conversation from white students, because I have talked to a number of them. But I think for the sake of this talk, I really did just need to center their voices. I would love to go give another talk or have a round table or some discussion where white students do speak up and share their sentiments. That, like I said, almost all of the students in my class are white, and they've all been active and lively and offered great thoughts. But it's just very clear to me that the Black students feel as though they have no space or opportunity for their ideas to be shared in a grander sense. It's clear there's a sense of undercommons kind of networking on a ground level work, and that's great and beautiful to see. But in order to go and center that in a different sort of way, there did need to be a space coming through that. So that's also one reason why I tried to step back from my deep critical analysis of the school and center their testimonial explanations. And I know there are a number of administrators here, but how do I? It shouldn't take the same administrators to come over and over again to a sentiment, and this is just a political phenomenon that's been studied, including by certain people at PC. And so if we see the same administrators come, are they even representing the college, or are they representing themselves and their offices to go speak up? Those are two very different things coming forward. It makes me think, if we think in a similar institution, the United States government, while the president might be the head of state and the head of government, the people working in the soon-to-be defunct education department have a totally different idea about how the government should work, and they're not invested in the same way as an elected politician. So I see an interesting craft. I haven't come up with terminology for it. I'm sure there's research somewhere that describe a different brand of administrators. Again, if someone can't come, that's fine as well. But again, we just have to ask the question, where are they today or next time or so on and so forth? Because if the question doesn't get at, this is just a Socratic question. I'm just pulling this from my hero Socrates. He would ask why. I stand by that one. But yeah.
I wanted to extend my appreciation for your talk. I enjoyed it so much. So many of the topics and themes you touched on were happening when I was here in 1993. I graduated. And then the class before mine, the seniors, protested so that they could have an Office of Multicultural Student Affairs. What surprises me over and over again is that each class of students feels as though they have been the first to set foot at PC land, because there is no representation of the strong history of Black aunts and uncles and brown people who were here before them that laid this path. They have no idea we exist. I don't see us anywhere. And that is part of, I imagine, the alienation, or at least it's part of why I felt alienated as a student at PC. I also appreciated you pointing out the labor our students have to do to make a space for them that feels safe and inclusive, that is not their job. That is our job. They get to be fragile. They get to be confused. They get to be puzzled and make mistakes and not be pointed at as a representative of the entire Black community. They get to have autonomy and grow. But when you have to work to make a safe space for you, that process gets interrupted. And so I really appreciated you bringing that to the forefront. And my last comment, because I know it's late, is that Providence College has a whole book that teaches us how to treat people. And yet the responsibility remains on those who are being mistreated to teach the mistreater how to treat. And I find that that labor is not fair to be expected of our children. They get to grow too. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Paul, for giving this talk. And as a faculty member on the tenure track here, I'm Dr. Scott, the one who's a long way from the retirement that he alluded to in the speech. But it's interesting, and I just want to echo this. You've been here 2.5 months, and you're echoing sentiments that I think Black Studies faculty in now my 4th year have heard every year from Black students who will come up to us after class and say, hey, you know, like this is my freshman year, I don't know how I'm feeling here, I don't know if I want to stay here, I'm thinking about transferring, I don't have community. So this is something that we're hearing every year, and this is only my 4th year. And we give space in Black Studies 101 for students to put together their own sorts of activism projects, and they can create whatever they want. We don't give them any guidance on what the topic can be on. And every single semester, one group chooses to say that Western Civ needs to be diversified in their syllabi. Every semester, with every faculty member who teaches Black Studies 101. And that is very telling in and of itself. So, and this is with zero guidance. We're like, talk about whatever you like. You can talk about anything in the world. And every semester, and often it's students who are not people of color who say this. So there are white students at this institution who are asking for more diversity in their Western Civ syllabi. And we're seeing it every semester. So I just want to echo that. I know you've been here 2.5 months, but I'm here on year 4, and I've seen it every semester. And just to echo the point that was just made about not seeing the history of the Black aunties and uncles, as was said, in sort of PC history. And I think some of that is about sort of the more recent investment that's just starting to kind of happen within Black studies in very substantive ways. Because there was a project last year at the Black Studies senior banquet where we sort of did a timeline of Black Studies history, but that takes investment within the Black Studies department as well, if we want to see these stories told and historicized in a meaningful way. So thank you so much for bringing this conversation to the forefront.
Just to respond quickly to those 2 points, something like creating a continuity and a sense of alumni support, that's something that can simply be done within a school. I'm just going to bear with. HBCUs are terribly underfunded in a deep way, but they have a sense of alumni unity that extends beyond simply, oh, this person went here. So this sense of alumni coming together, every week someone tells me, oh yeah, I work at PC and I went there back in the, so there is a sense of alumni community just naturally here. I don't see, when there are other schools that have modeled it, why it would be different for the development office to go and take some simple models, bring them into the alumni office and support. It shouldn't fall on Dr. Wheeler and Dr. Scott and Catherine and Dr. Affinia to go add and integrate Black alumni at see, I can't even keep all the liberals. You know, all these liberal arts schools are blending together. But the history of Black people at Providence, that shouldn't fall into that. That stuff could come from the alumni office. There's a huge engagement through the. And this stuff I'm saying, the biggest thing, I might not be a practical policy-based person, but you don't have to be in 2024. They already got DEI consultant firms going and mapping out exactly how to do all of this stuff. Or you just go and look at the nearest, you just go look at Williams and just steal whatever they did. And you all can say, okay, we're better than Williams College and Amherst and so forth, because we brought this in. So these systems don't even need to be complicated coming in. And again, I'm just looking at the room, and I can tell even the non-black students here care. They're still here on a Wednesday night. But it's just strange to me to see the sense of, it's not apathy, but I'll call it lethargy, a sense of what are we supposed to do as students in this space to go change something. And that is just very interesting to me. Again, when you go down the street and students at Brown protest about every single thing possible because they have nothing to do with their free time as Ivy League students who have, no, their lives are so much easier than all you PC students. So that, yes, they spend their free time protesting. So this sentiment is not new or unfounded.
Do you have any final questions?
I just got one last comment to make. A deep issue that comes with black activism is a sense of romanticizing struggle and oppression. It is so attractive to come and go and be drawn in to hear people talk about overcoming struggle. We talked about this with one of the guest lecturers in my class today. But at the same time, that means nothing without institutional engagement. And there is one simple way everyone in this classroom who is a student can go and support, and that is just to take a cross-listed Black Studies course. It is not that hard. The topics are diverse in so many ways. Dr. Scott and Dr. Wheeler are teaching vastly different things, but they're both coming in. We can't claim support of Black Studies if we don't put our money where our mouth is, and if there are not enough enrollment, it can't justify that, and that is exactly the kind of doing it in the name of tradition that can operate through. If we don't shake up and change what tradition means on our own hands, and that's something small we can all do. And I will just say this is not a decrial of any other class, but I think most students who have taken a Black Studies class can attest to the fact that they had deep fun the 3 times a week they met and got together with their professors. There's just a sense of fun and joy and sensuality that you just might not get in other fields, and that's because Black Studies was set up to celebrate that sort of raw humanity that Black people are just embrace. Yeah, that was my last comment.
I just want to ask everyone to give another round of applause to Dr. Cato, and thank you so much. Thank you so much for bringing this conversation to the table, because we really, as a department, we want to help foster closing these gaps at Providence College and building that community and that safe space. And I think that this conversation is a good place for us to start. So thank you so much again. And thank you all for coming out and being an attentive audience and engaging us in this conversation. And we look forward to seeing you at more Black Studies programming as the year continues. Please have a safe rest of the night. Thank you all for being here.